Books of Enderal, Tales of the Wanderer, the Well-Traveled One. I cannot claim that I attended many parties in my life. I also never loved like normal people. And concerning women, well, I don't know what it means to share a bed with them. Soft, mellow kisses or tenderness are not a part of my destiny. The harsh wind of the tides which slowly carries me off, the surging waves of the salty sea, on mountains and in the shadow of old trees, underneath a sparkling starry sky, that is where I feel at home. I visited many places, saw much evil. These are my priceless memories which will stay with me until death. A lone wanderer, eternally cursed to stride ahead towards a brightly shining sun at the horizon. At this mild evening near the end of summer, none of that mattered. Every so often I wished that the time could stand still. The world would stay as it is with me, still sitting on the wooden bench in the middle of the decorated village square, having the seducing whispers of that girl in my ear. The festivities were in full swing since early noon and were still going strong in the evening. The party put the whole village in an exceptional state. The tall oaks and poplars shine in the light of red, green, blue, and yellow lampoons which were hung at ropes between houses and trees. The villagers danced, ate, and drank exuberantly. In fine, it was straight from a book. The reason for the festivities was not just the bountiful harvest, but also the marriage of the village chief's daughter, with a young, sturdy, good-looking boy from the neighboring village to boot. Singing and the sounds of lutes, flutes, and whatever instruments could be found resounded in the alleys. The elderly told the fable stories to the children, and several artists performed the whole day long on a stage, starting with jugglers to animal tamers. I could tell you about the splendid atmosphere the whole day. I enjoyed it to the fullest, even though one could hardly tell as much when looking at me. In the middle of all this hustle and bustle, I cautiously sipped on my mug filled with beer. Despite my inner joy, I wasn't here by chance. There was something to do for me in this village. I had to meet somebody. As I was watching the villagers dancing, a finger tenderly tapped on my shoulder. I turned around and found myself looking in the face of a young woman. Her hair flew down her shoulders as walnut-brown little curls and framed her pink-colored face with cheeks reddened by alcohol. Her glance was light and sweet, but there was something more to it, some sort of immeasurable depth. Still waters run deep, as the popular saying goes. But enough of that. "My sir, may I ask you for this dance? You look so gloomy. Such is simply not allowed at such a nice and festive day," she said. I smirked. "Am I not a bit too old for you?" I was still in my prime, but anyone would have seen that the girl was very young. She could have decided on any other man out there instead of me. "Luckily, that is not yours to decide." She held her hand out to me. I shortly struggled with myself, but eventually I yielded to my desire. She led me to the place where the dancing people gathered. I was never a good dancer, that is something you should know. But after a short while, she ensnared me so much that I even whirled her around and performed dance steps which I never even dreamt of. I enjoyed it. It does not happen often that I can forget everything around me, all the torrent and the whispers of the earth. At that day, her beautiful face in front of me, I was allowed to do just that. We sat down on a bench, talked about this and that, about things common people usually talk. I could not resist telling her that she was to my fancy. If my appointment would have allowed me to, I would have probably spent a few days with her. Perhaps we could have become a cute couple, with children, calm evenings filled with noisy crickets and coziness. While thinking about that, my heart sinks. But I always knew about the sacrifices I had to make. It slowly got darker, the night fell, and the artists left the stage one by one. The village chief, obviously drunk, teetered under the podium located at the head of the celebrating people. He put his mug down and clapped his hands. Silence spread in the village square. Meanwhile, a joke of mine made the girl laugh so much that she nearly fell off the bench. "My name is Laurie. You still haven't told me yours, stranger," she said, and got so close to me that I can clearly perceive her scent. She bathed a short while ago, maybe even just today before the party, and smelled unbelievably nice. The moment I wanted to answer her, the village chief, with a loud voice, announced, "Come on, guys! Until now, everything was well and good, but now the real show begins. For the highlight of the evening, I have an extraordinary surprise for all of you. Since my daughter and her groom, no price is too high. He came to us from far lands, and after he already astonished the neighboring villages with his skills, he finally arrived at this place. Let us welcome the legendary and crazy fire breather, Dagobah, the famous flame of Nerim. I picked up my ears. A tense silence filled the air. I owed my name to Laurie, although I couldn't have told her a name anyways. I didn't have one. Would have been a nobody in her eyes anyway. A scrawny fellow entered the stage and bowed to the audience. He wore long, baggy trousers which he had to put into boots. Some burn scars could be seen on his naked upper body. Sideways he was missing some hairs, probably also a victim of scorch. The rest protruded from his head like a gray-white thicket. He bowed, drank a specific liquid, and picked up his torch. I curiously watched what happened next. From the torch, a gust of fire shot in the air. With his other hand, he opened the file and pivoted it in front of the fire. The flames followed his motion and created a long, swirling, and shimmering snake. He let the snake whir above the stage so that it did several tricks, while he himself acrobatically danced over the wooden planks to finish all the complicated figures. His performance took the breath of the whole audience. The snake had only been the beginning of his show. It was followed by artistic interludes with bow and arrow, and several other homemade constructions, which he combined with his flame arts. In any case, Dagobah lived up to his name. Eventually, the artist was busy entwining 2 fire spirals. I noticed some movement in the rear rows of the spectators. People were roughly brushed aside. 3 guards pushed their way through to the stage. I anticipated that. Now things would get even more interesting. The guards, who were clearly men of Chancellor Baratheon, who recently taken control of Nerim's middle realm, walked on the stage while the village elder wildly protested. One of them took the torch from the fire breather, threw it to the ground, and noisily stamped it out. Laurie moved closer to me while being frightened. "Are you the man named the Flame of Nerim?" one of the soldiers grumbled, who was apparently the commander of the small troop. "Who wants to know that?" Dagobah asked. "Don't get cocky. You are using forbidden arts, magic, right? Don't deny it, we saw enough of your flippery. Chancellor Baratheon doesn't tolerate your kind anymore. We were ordered to take you with us." "And to where do you sirs intend to bring me?" asked Dagobah politely. "To the dark cell in which you belong," was the answer. Dagobah sighed. "All right, let me collect my belongings, then I'll come with you." I frowned. That was too easy. He would never surrender so fast. The fire breather went to the back side of the stage and rummaged around in his stuff. "I never liked Baratheon one bit, even before he came to power. I always thought that his breath smelled awful, and you could smell it throughout the whole town whenever he held a speech," he said, with his back to the soldiers. Weapons clanked at that. Suddenly Dagobah turned around and threw a metallic something between the 3 soldiers, something with 8 mechanical legs. "Ah, what's this?" There was a loud noise and the thing exploded. A green smoke screen engulfed the soldiers, and they started coughing and staggering around aimlessly. The village square descended into turmoil. I broke away from the baffled Laurie without any sort of goodbye and shouldered my way through the crowd. Now my merry life was over. I had to leave. I had to leave my dream bubble, which I created for a short time, and went back to my mission. I saw Dagobah only after I had left the crowd. He left the village at a smart pace. I quietly followed him for a while through the dark night and small forests. He stopped in one of those with their roots. 2 big trees overgrew the entrance to an old burial chamber, bathed in moonlight and placed in the fangs of a slope. The iron gate, which should bar the entrance, was bent so much that one could easily get through it. If I kept on following him, there was the danger of scaring him away, so I placed everything on one card. "So, this is where you're hiding." He flinched, just like a timid animal, shortly before he disappeared into the tomb. I slid down the slope so that I can see him clearly. "A good hiding place. These soldiers won't surely look for you here." "If nobody tells them about it, then yes." Certainly was a bit of threat mixed into his tone. He turned around and faced me. "You have nothing to fear from me," I declared. Silence descended upon this place. The cry of a tawny owl resounded in the forest, cutting the silence in half like a sharp sword. "There are stories about a wanderer in this area. Those about you." "From where?" "I can tell by your smell. You do not smell like this part of the world. It's more like a combination of many different smells from all over the world." He interrupted my question. "Seems you have quite the fine nose." He went closer to me and sniffed. "No, just an exceptionally trained one. I interact quite often with animals like squirrels, smart fellows. They taught me how to truly use one's nose. I see, I responded while being mildly irritated. It was known that Dragobar was a bit of a lunatic, but it also said that he was not always like that in the past, before the madness caught him. Nevertheless, he was still very intelligent, and his inventories for the stage and his thought over the way of moving showed. His every move was thoughtful. Then perhaps you also know why I'm here. Of course! It's not like I'm stupid. You want to write a story about me, just like your sort tends to do. You are not the first person of craft that I meet, not a common wanderer, a collector. But why are you collecting them, the warrior skills I mean? For a war? Are you building an army in secret, molding according to your beliefs? Or is there a much bigger mystery around all this? He fell silent. I will tell you my story only after you answer my questions. I returned his mad look unyieldingly and resolutely with a glance, steadier than the old stone. I cannot answer them. If you already know my craft, you should know that. Well, then you may leave right now, and I won't tell you anything about me, no matter what you may have heard about me before. He tried to disappear into the darkness of the burial chamber. There are many stories about you. That Dragobar, Flame of Narum, is said to have learnt fire-breathing from dragons themselves, that he himself is a dragon with a human appearance, and I shortly paused to deepen the impact of the following words, that he is said to be the only survivor of the Sunfire. Dragobar's face froze to ice in the moonlight which broke through the trees, as if a long-forgotten memory slowly creeped back into his mind. I investigated you for a long time before I could finally track you here. That wasn't easy. You managed to hide yourself damned well. Dragobar stayed silent. I know many things about you. Who would I be if I let a genius like you slip through my fingers without mentioning them in my chronicles? You were present when Dalmeric researched the Sunwheel and destroyed Thalgard with his greed. No, I'm saying that you weren't just present, but even his assistant, one of the most famous arcane inventors and strategists of your time. Am I right? The look of the fire-breather had lost its focus, now turned it back on me. Taurus the Arcane One, or Taurus Tasselrock, if you prefer your given name to the one drivel poets impose on you. Perhaps you already forgot your real name. After all, that happened more than 2,000 and several lives ago. There is just one thing you have to tell me, as that's something I've yet to understand fully. How did you manage to survive for so long? Dragobar looked ahead ghastly. Suddenly he started laughing. That's a nice story you created there. You shouldn't take too much of that glimmerdust, Cap, my sir. I am a simple fire-breather from Narum. I am honored that you saw such a famous character in me. At the same time, I am sorry that I have to disappoint you. He bowed, obviously a sign to tell me how unwelcome I was. Cut it out. Your mask fell off long ago. You know exactly that you cannot trick someone like me, I insisted. His silly kindness was gone quickly. Let's come straight to the point. Does someone else know thereof? He asked in a cold voice. I sighed. Are you in earnest? Do you really want to threaten me? That would belly your former splendor. I could hear how he grinded his teeth. He had to fight with himself, which told me that I was on the right track. I would call that one of the most enthralling discoveries of our era. The way I see it, you have two choices from your standpoint. You kill me and by doing so bear your secret for all of eternity, or you try to have a conversation with me and hear what I have to say. I advise you to choose the latter with regard to the abilities as one myself has to acquire in my line of work, which can make me into the worst nightmare for my enemies, if I have to use it on them, as you should know, I said. The fire-breather remained silent. He most likely weighted his options. Then he took a step towards me. I twitched barely noticeably. He walked past me, towards a rock, and sat down. For a short moment I thought he would attack me. What is it you want to know? Tell me what happened back then. If I could, the last thing I remember is an ear-piercing, enormous explosion which took both my hearing and sight. Beforehand, Dalmeric and I tried to decipher the artifact. We failed, which could be common knowledge. After I woke after the explosion, I was in an entirely different place, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Kira's desert. I was lucky that a caravan took me in. Like that, it took its course. He started to tell me about what happened from then on, about his travels over the continents, about his search for a new meaning in life, about how he let Taurus die and took the name Dragobar, and many more. In a way, his current self resembled mine. He wandered all the time, home and nameless. He became a nobody. You changed after the explosion, didn't you? Something had changed. He nodded. I lost all my magical abilities. I couldn't even light a small fire anymore. How disgraceful for a former master. At the same time, I gained eternal life. Age cannot kill me anymore. As long as nobody pierces me with a spear, I could live until Ven turns to ashes. Immortality. An eternal life. I thought that was only possible for the lost ones in a much more macabre way. Then you're wrong. Though it's not like I can live the dream that most have. The longer I live, the more insane I get. Madness takes over me mind slowly, and I live for the day. Fighting it doesn't help. I can't prevent it. Why did you work as a fire breather, and why on Nirim? Fire breathing was a nice hobby for me, next to all the battles, even in the past. This identity as Dragobah gave me support when I had none. And why Nirim? Well, until this Chancellor came to power, it was a nice place to live. I wandered around north to south through settlements on the way. Always had something to eat and a roof over my head. Most of the people here highly esteem true talent. He made a sweeping gesture with his hands. After a long period of silence, I collected myself for the coming and most important part of our conversation. I thought that it was finally time to get to the point. I'm not just here to write about you. Every so often, my mission also involves the task to help souls, which do not belong to this world anymore, find their path. The magical power of the artifact had a different effect on you than your companions and your master. It spared you for whatever reason and brought you to another place. Perhaps the reason was that you still had the mission to accomplish in your life. It granted you supernatural powers and left much of you in here and now. But this magical trace was the reason why I found you. You do not belong here anymore, Taurus. I can see into your innermost self. Your time is long up. The mission which bound you to life was already accomplished. He dropped his gaze. You want to kill me? No. Killing contradicts my creed. I can do something else for you, but it will only work if you make peace with yourself and you're ready to go. After such a long time, it is always hard to say goodbye. Tell me, what is it? I reached into my bag and pulled out a flat stone, roughly as big as a fingertip. It shimmered weakly in the light of the night and mirrored the colors of a rainbow. This is a shifter. I put it down on a tree stump. Swallow it, and you will be able to leave this world without any pain. Won't you force me to swallow it? Taurus said in wonder. Judging over life and death is not my task. I want to help you. If there is ever a time in which ordeal of being immortal becomes too much for you to handle, take it. It will set you free. I pulled my cape closer and turned around. The foliage of the last autumn which covered the floor rustled under my boots. Thank ye, wanderer. I nodded while looking in the opposite direction and left the little forest. Whether he still lives or made use of my help, I cannot say. Dragobah, Taurus, the Arcane One, the Flame of Nirim. That man had many names, many of which we do not even know. I want to add one to those. Taurus Tasselrock, the well-traveled one.